In this video, we will share with you the untold stories of Bette Davis, while showing you some of her rare photos. Bette Davis had to endure some of the most painful scenarios of her life before she could get a shot at becoming the successful actress she later became. And when she got to the top, according to her daughter, she did some of the most unspeakable things to stay relevant. You might have heard of the story of her practicing witchcraft against her enemies, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many other things that happened that not a lot of people know about, and in this video, we will reveal them all while showing you some of her rare photos. Without further ado, let's get started. Davis, her mother, and her sister all enjoyed a smooth life until her father abandoned them in 1916. Then things took a very harsh turn. Interestingly, as things got even tougher, Bette Davis was dragged closer to her destiny. It all started for her in a local boarding school, which she attended with her sister as teenagers. In school, young Bette was initiated into the world of arts and entertainment. Things got more serious after the family moved to New York, and Davis enrolled in the Robert Milton School of Theater and Dance. She shared the same class with actress Lucille Ball. Davis finally got the opportunity that she had waited so long for in Broken Dishes, her Broadway debut. The young actress made sure to impress her audience, and soon calls from Hollywood started coming in. Universal Studios had the biggest paycheck, but nothing could have prepared her for what came with it. On a train, Bette and her mother traveled to Hollywood only to meet the disappointments of their lives. According to Davis, the studio employee that was supposed to meet them had left, and her excuse was that she didn't see anyone who looked like an actress. Bette had lost that opportunity forever, but the studio promised to compensate her, only if what they had required of her wasn't so disgusting. The actress narrated how she was contracted to do screen tests for other actors, and that was where they had her share passionate kisses with over 15 actors as they searched for the perfect scene. Davis put up with the most miserable moments in her life, but her studio bosses were not impressed. They all thought that she could have done better. The head of the studio was prepared to terminate her contract, but he was advised by the cinematographer to let Davis stay. The cinematographer believed that Bette had lovely eyes, and so was the perfect actress for the 1931 Bad Sisters. The film, after production, was not as successful as they had thought it would be, and Bette was blamed for it. The studio continued to be patient with her until after a year and 6 unsuccessful projects, then they terminated her contract. With bags packed and eyes set on returning to New York, Davis was called up for her first female lead role in the 1932 Warner Brothers picture The Man Who Played God. Bette Davis found favor in her new studio and so was awarded a 5-year contract, but the actress remained there for the next 18 years. After appearing in over 20 films, Davis had her critical breakthrough in the 1934 radio production of Human Bondage, and she also earned her first major critical acclaim for her performance in this film. We enjoyed seeing Bette Davis on screen because she was not like what we were used to. Many female actresses of her time rejected roles that were not sympathetic, but to Bette, that was her ticket to superstardom. The grass surely looked and felt greener in Warner Brothers, but Davis would be surprised at what would happen as she decided to spread her wings a little further. Just like the many actresses that came before and after her, Bette Davis's first reaction to fame was to see how far up her privileges were. In the spring of 1936, Bette asked Warner if she could feature in RKO's Mary of Scotland, but he refused. He already had 2 films that were written specifically for the star actress and couldn't afford to have her distracted. God's Country and the Woman and Mountain of Justice were the movies in script. Warner tried to apologize, but Bette was already plotting a cold revenge in her heart. As the films went into production, Davis refused to work. She insisted on a salary increase. Now, this was not a very big problem, so the studio offered to increase her weekly pay from $1,250 to $2,250, but Davis wanted more. She asked for $3,500 a week, plus all radio rights and permission to make outside pictures. This was just too much, and the studio refused her demands. Bette continued to refuse to work until she was suspended and sanctioned in court by Warner Brothers. The court dismissed all of her claims of being an underpaid slave and asked her to pay $80,000 in restitution to her studio for unlawful breach of contract. But as it would seem, Bette's dark nights birthed her brightest days. That same year, Bette was featured in what is recognized by many as one of the most important films in her career, The 1937 marked drama was a huge success and won Davis many awards and recognitions. The following year, the actress starred in the 1938 Jezebel, and for her performance in the film, she was honored with an Academy Award for Best Actress. And for the next 5 years, Davis would continue to receive the Best Actress nomination. All through her career, Davis won the Academy Award for Best Actress twice, and she was the first person to accrue 10 Academy Award nominations for acting. Davis enjoyed the best of the industry, but the men that she would let into her heart would become her greatest unbecoming. Bette Davis's first official romance was with her boarding school sweetheart, musician Harmon Nelson. The couple tied the knot on August 18, 1932, and that was the beginning of Harmon's troubles. First, he was constantly taunted by the media for earning 10 times less in a week than his famous wife, and after 6 years of marriage, Nelson couldn't endure any further. He filed for divorce, and his major reason was that Bette read too much. According to Harmon, in their marriage, he would always sit and watch his wife read to a very unnecessary degree. He also stated that she considered work more important than family, and that was not the kind of woman he wanted to spend forever with. While this story always painted Davis as the villain, Harmon also had blood on his hands. During the first few years of their marriage, Bette took in twice, and the musician ordered her to terminate the pregnancy. This was in the 1930s, and the procedures for abortion were very dangerous. Their divorce was finalized in 1938, and Davis took her excessive reading elsewhere. The actress would not stop looking until she finally met her match. Bette found love again in the arms of the man who directed 3 of her best movies. Director William Wyler was Davis's star director, and together they worked on projects like the 1938 Jezebel, The Letter in 1940, and The Little Foxes in 1941. While most of their time together was spent in arguments, Bette just couldn't deny Wyler's intellectual prowess, and that was exactly what kept her coming back. The major reason why this romance failed was because of their ego. According to the popular stories, William had written a letter to Bette with a proposal to marry her, but he mandated the actress to respond in a week, or he would marry someone else. Davis felt insulted and delayed her response, and true to his words, he got married the following week. The next man on the list was Davis's private masseur, William Grant Sherry. The actress instantly found Sherry attractive when he said that he had not heard of her before, and so was not intimidated by who she was. They tied the knot in 1945, and 2 years later, at the age of 39, Davis gave birth to a daughter, Barbara Davis Sherry. The couple separated after 5 years, and very little is known about their reason for separation. Davis's final marriage was to Gary Merrill, her co-star in the 1950s All About Eve. Bette broke up with him when she discovered that he had a drinking problem. Another crazy thing about Bette Davis is that she knew how to keep a grudge as much as she knew how to perform behind the camera, and the best of it produced one of the biggest rivalries Hollywood has ever seen. Joan Crawford and Bette Davis hated each other so much that when they would finally meet for the first time on stage, they had forgotten why they were enemies. What really happened between them? How did the two stars hate each other so much that they couldn't even stay in the same room? Crawford was older than Bette in the industry, so by the time Davis joined Hollywood, Joan was already an established actress. In her early days in the industry, Davis planned to boost her publicity with a newspaper campaign for the comedy Ex-Lady. But the day of her launch happened to be the same day Crawford announced that she was divorcing her husband. The news of Crawford's divorce frustrated Bette's publicity campaign, as newspapers were more interested in the celebrity divorce. And that was how it all started. To add salt to injury, Joan Crawford, when it was time to get married again, was going to pick Davis's man. "I have never forgiven her for that and never will," Davis said in a 1983 interview, 52 years after this happened. On the set of the drama Dangerous, Bette fell in love with her co-star François Tone. They nurtured their love, and it was a blissful one, until Davis read in the papers that the man she loved so much was getting married to an enemy. "She took him from me," Davis recounted in that interview. She did it coldly, deliberately, and with complete ruthlessness. In 1943, Crawford made the move to Warner Brothers from rival studio MGM, and guess where she requested that her dressing room be? Adjacent Bette Davis. She occasionally sent flowers and gifts, but Davis returned all of them. Their hatred for each other grew by the day and was fueled even further by events like Crawford winning an Oscar for a role Davis had rejected, and Davis hitting Joan so hard that her head required stitches on the set of the 1962 horror film Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. When Joan died in 1977, Bette was not as happy as she had thought she would be, and she confessed that although they hated each other, she had deep respect for her talent. While Davis and Crawford had a lot of differences, they shared just one thing in common: difficult relationships with their daughters. And when the fight with Crawford was over with her death, Davis continued with her own daughter, B.D. Hyman. Both mother and daughter maintained a front that all was well, but Hyman got tired and would expose the true nature of their relationship. She published a tell-all book which was titled My Mother's Keeper, a daughter's candid portrait of her famous mother. And in it, she revealed some of her mother's deepest secrets. In the book, Hyman described her mother as an abusive alcoholic who was prone to rage. Bette felt betrayed and never forgave her for it. Even after Davis's death, Hyman would continue to say bad things about her mother. Perhaps her most interesting public confession would be the one where she exposes Bette Davis as a witch. According to her, when Bette was alive, she experimented with witchcraft and would often cast spells on her enemies from bed. She would even describe a night when she saw her mother transform into a satanic figure with long claws on the end of her hands. Also, in the video, Hyman reveals that she was haunted by Bette Davis's ghost. Even though my mother had died in 1989, the demons that were attached to her were still working actively against us, she said. It is not very unlikely that Hyman has finally made peace with her deceased mother, as she doesn't talk about their relationship as much in recent times. However, many people believe that she is not talking because the media has stopped paying attention to her. In 1983, Bette Davis was diagnosed with breast cancer, and the actress went in for a mastectomy to save herself from the deadly disease. But things didn't go as expected. A few weeks before surgery, Davis had 4 strokes, which caused paralysis in the left side of her face and her left arm. She had difficulties in walking and struggled with speech as well. Surgery improved her condition, but the disease was coming back more life-threatening than it was. In 1989, Davis collapsed during the American cinema, and upon visit to the hospital, it was discovered that the cancer had returned and it had taken most of her vital organs. The actress managed to travel to Spain for an awards ceremony, and that was where the disease gained full control. Davis was too weak to make the journey back to the US, so she went to France, and that was where she died. Bette was 81 years old. Her body was entombed in Forest Lawn Hollywood Cemetery alongside her mother, Ruthie, and her sister, Bobby. In Bette's last days, she confessed that she has lots of regret about the way she lived her life, but she was still happy that each failure came with a lesson. Bette Davis might be dead, but her legacy lives on as one of the best to ever stand behind a camera. She was talented, bold, and defying in all exciting ways. Even her enemies constantly testified to how good she was at what she did. At the time of her death in 1989, the actress had an estimated net worth of $1 million. Now it's your turn. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our other videos of beautiful actresses from the yesteryears on the end screen. As always, thanks for watching.